Okay, welcome back. Hope you're caffeinated and refreshed. So hope you've enjoyed the day so far. We've very much enjoyed having you. Thank you for bringing the good weather. So the plan now is we're going to be a really brief session for the scholarship managers to give you any introductions, updates, whatever. We're going to keep that as brief as possible. And we have myself, Michael Moss from the Churchill Foundation, and Hilary from the Cambridge Trust. And then we're going to hand it over to the experts. So we're going to have the panel of scholars, who's going to be chaired by and moderated by Paul. And you can get to hear from them and ask questions. And then we will promise to put you on the bus, as instructed by Mary, at just before 4 and wave you a tearful goodbye. So I hope that's okay. You better not be. There will be riots here. Okay, so really quickly, I don't have many updates for you on a Gates Cambridge level. I just want to say 3 things. First of all, it's sort of essentially business as usual. I'm happy to take questions later on. The only thing that I would mention, because I think, I was about to say there's a rumour, but I think I actually created it, was that we were going to move from nationality to country of residence next year. We almost did until this week when I realised there were potential issues around that. And the background to this is we had lots of legal advice saying we probably had to, or should do at least, but we now are going to have further discussions. So for this coming season, so October 2017 entry, I guess, we are sticking with nationality, and so same as before, no major changes. It's all on the website, and I'm happy to answer any questions later on. So really there's no major change from us. I just want to take 2 other quick things. One is really important, about a really important person. This is Louisa, our new program administrator. If you haven't met her already, Louisa is the one that does all the actual work and will be interacting with you, and for whom I occasionally take credit. No. So Louisa, feel free to come and say hi and ask any questions. That's the sort of new important member of staff. The other thing I would say is hot off the press last night is our exciting new Gates Scholar magazine with loads of really interesting articles written by Gates scholars, so similar to the stuff you've heard today. We have the magazine, we have the annual report, we have some posters. I've even brought some University of Cambridge flyers because finally they have some. Amazing. It doesn't say anything, but they have some, which is important. So it just has to say the logo, and it's all good. That's right. So please do pick them up, because I don't want to carry them back to the office. And yeah, hope to see you after those. So I think I'm going to keep this brief. That's all I think I need to say. I'm going to pass it over to Michael for an update on his world, and then Hilary, and then we'll open up to the rest of the guys. So Michael.
So you want me to hold this?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I love introducing myself as being from the Winston Churchill Foundation, because then I say I am the Winston Churchill Foundation. Just to give you a sense of how much smaller we are than some of our peers here, I'm the only full-time employee. We only have now 15 scholarships a year, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. So how many of you are familiar with the Churchill Scholarship? Just because I just want to make sure that I'm... So most of you, but not everybody. So I'll just give a little bit of basics. Well, it's like the others. It's for people graduating in the sciences and science, math, and engineering. It's for a 1-year master's degree here. It has to be at Churchill College. We require that applicants apply to Churchill College when they apply to Cambridge, and as a result, a lot of the scientists from Gates and others wind up at Churchill. And Churchill College tells me that they love this, so I can't change it. So the question is, why is there a scholarship in science and technology named after Winston Churchill? After all, that's not really what he did. And the story is that in the 1940s, he visited MIT. And he looked around and he said, this place is great. We should get one of these back in the UK. And after the war, there just wasn't the money for that. And so they kind of whittled down the idea, and they created Churchill College, which we have this practice in the U.S. of presidential libraries and archives. It's kind of the equivalent of his prime ministerial archive, but it's a living archive. It's a college. He wanted it to be for science and technology because he saw that was the future. It's the only college in Cambridge that has got a science and technology orientation to it. 70% of the students and faculty. It's not 100%, but 70% from those fields. If you go to Oxford, they don't have any college like that. So it really is kind of unique in British education or in education generally. And as many of you here are from our participating institutions, part of our keeping very small is that we limit the number of applicants because we can't deal with a lot of applicants. So participating institutions can nominate up to 2 people per year. If you're not a participating institution and you're interested, please talk to me. There is a procedure. We're open-minded about it. I think that's. I don't want to. I could go on all day, but
questions later, so.
yeah, but we can. But that's the basics. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, I'll just say very few words about the Cambridge Trust, because I suspect that not all of you are quite clear. I mean, Cambridge is a very confusing place. It just is. And this is one of the levels of confusion, is that there are various organisations offering scholarship programmes. So we sit alongside the Gates programme within Cambridge. We are an independent charity, but we're totally embedded within the University of Cambridge. Our full name is actually the Cambridge Commonwealth, European and International Trust. So you can see why we call ourselves the Cambridge Trust. It's too much of a mouthful. We have one sole objective, and that is to enable as many students as possible who gain admission to the University of Cambridge but don't have the financial resources to take up their offers to be able to do so regardless of their social or economic background. So we now award scholarships to all nationalities at undergraduate, master's and PhD level, but predominantly masters and PhDs. On behalf of, just a small thing about size, we're a staff of 12, and we offer between 400 and 500 different scholarships each academic year. So in any given year, we have about 1,100 scholars in residence. Most of those, I would say about 2/3 of those are on full cost scholarships and about 1/3 on part cost scholarships. I think that's probably all I need to say now, because I guess most of the rest will come up in the Q&As. Okay.
Sounds good. All right, we'll hand it over to the experts.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to bring our panel in. So who's going to come on down?
Shall we sort of sit at the edge?
Yeah.
Great.
I'll give you a seat.
Oh, yeah. So I'm probably the only one who you've seen like running around but you don't actually know yet. I'm Paul Bergen. I'm originally from Miami. I went to Auburn University. I'm here on a PhD. I'm a third-year PhD scholar through the Gates Cambridge Trust. I'm also president of the Scholars Council at Gates Cambridge, which is one of the things that makes our scholarship quite nice, is we have not only an awesome community, but the resources from the community as well as from the trust to hold events and the like. So if you have any questions on that, I'm happy to answer them. But yeah, I was told I'm supposed to moderate this panel. But I will have to say, what Cambridge instills in you is a great sense of imposter syndrome. And so rather than moderate this panel and try to get these wonderful people to my left and right to talk about their experience here, I think it's probably just better if you guys have any questions that you would like to ask us, and then we will try to answer them to the best of our ability.
I enjoy your remark about the imposter syndrome. I recognize that my daughter's at Columbia and she uses the term all the time. But in retrospect, now having arrived, so to speak, having received this recognition, is there something you feel that somehow you brought to the application that sets you apart? The readers will have perhaps found it something different, but in your own mind, what do you think you uniquely brought to the competition?
Please
Tough question.
don't feel weird about that.
That was amazing. Yeah. It's like being on the panel again.
Sure, we're not the first time, right? I didn't think it was that.
Yeah, I mean, I can take a shot at it.
Go ahead.
So I think the two things that I remember from the interview processes and the application, I think one was a sense that the way I sort of had a strong sense for how my past sort of fit together and the kinds of things I wanted to study. and being able to tell that narrative. I have to thank Sarah Vox from the Office of Fellowships. I know all of you are really instrumental in helping make that happen, I think, with so many students, is helping really narrow in on that, really getting to the essence of what you're trying to accomplish by taking the next step in your academic path. But I think the other piece is very much why Cambridge, or why this academic program, right? Really like making that fit together well. And I think a lot of you were already asking those questions when we were speaking in terms of why it made sense. Maybe that's sort of, I would say that those are two basic things. I don't know if other people want to comment on other, expand on that.
Expanding on the second point, I think, is a really important thing that Gates Cambridge, and also probably just Cambridge in general, looks at in accepting people for admission, and that's that you're not just having students that want to come to Cambridge for a year or 4 years, and for no reason other than to come to Cambridge, but that you have some reason to actually be here doing the research here rather than anywhere else in the world. And so for me, my supervisor here is probably one of, if not the world's leading expert in Burundi, which is my topic. So having her here was a very strong pull for me to want to come to Cambridge. And then that was a strong, I think, something that worked in my favor in terms of being admitted, that had very little to do with me as a person and my qualifications, but was a strong reason for me to come to Cambridge to do this work and then to be funded to be here.
And one thing that I really noticed in my interview that helped, and that helped me think about the whole thing, was thinking about my ability to communicate, and emphasizing that that's something that was not just an interview skill, but something that would help me in the sciences and communicating the sciences, and outside of that, because I'm good at communicating these things, I don't want to just be shut off in the lab all day forever. I want to be able to get involved in the community at Cambridge and communicate what I'm doing, and work with others that maybe aren't doing the same exact thing. So I think that, showing that I had an idea of the broader context of myself at Cambridge, and being able to interact with that broader context was something that I tried to express throughout the application process, and something that has really helped and allowed me to go beyond just the lab here at Cambridge.
Just saying, that was very vivid in your presentation.
Yeah.
Thanks. I try to channel my Bill Nye the Science guy.
So this question's come up a few times at other schools, but for those of you who are studying STEM and pursuing STEM disciplines, how did you have to navigate, and if so, how did you navigate the perception or misperception about an international STEM degree if you're planning on going back to the U.S. and pursuing an academic career?
I think, so I was lucky that my undergrad advisor was both very supportive but also very honest about what he perceived to be the climate in the United States. So I should also mention I'm at Churchill, which is very strong in the STEM. So there are a lot of us at Churchill College, because there are a lot of Americans there that kind of are working through this. And I think the big thing to remember is the UK is kind of pushing towards, very slowly, a longer degree, or at least more of an emphasis on publishing. And the US is sort of, kind of, in some areas, at least in my field in biology, pushing towards shorter and shorter degrees with, again, the emphasis on publishing. So they're kind of balancing out. But I think what my undergrad advisor emphasized was just be realistic about what you can accomplish in that short time. Be able to gather skills from around that, so techniques become much more important than if you had an extended time where it's your data that becomes very important. Now it's what are you learning and how you can apply that to different fields. And also just know that you may be asked to do an extended postdoc, but also you're starting from a position much earlier on than most of your American colleagues. So that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world either for you.
Yeah, just to go off of that, the sentiment from a few professors, not just at Nova, but people I interacted with, was kind of, what are you doing going over there? They come over here. That's how this works in science. I've heard people almost explicitly say that. And 50 years ago, that was truer. It was never a complete truth, and that's not even remotely true now. Science has changed. There are so many institutions around the world, especially in the UK and Europe, that are doing fantastic science, just as good as in the United States, and have better specialties. Where I am right now, the lab of molecular biology is probably the best place to do structural biology and EM work for what I want to do in the world. Like, there is no US equivalent. So I think that that's something that people are starting to realize in the States, but you just need to point at publications. That's really what it comes down to. Like, especially in academia, people aren't looking at where you did your work so much, it's where did you publish. And so if you're in a position that you've selected at that institute where you're able to publish and do what you want to do and do it well, people recognize that over wherever exactly it was from.
We've got three scholarships represented here. Maybe if you want to delve into the world of ESPs, maybe? Oh, he's asking for trouble.
Why did you guys apply? Like, I mean, how did you get to it? Did you know about it beforehand?
So two of them have to say Sarah. One of them has to say
Fellowship advisors like yourselves. You guys.
It was an obvious question. I deserve that. I was thinking more, like, I feel like my students do not walk around thinking of themselves necessarily, or certainly prior to a lot of interactions, thinking that they even would go somewhere else to do their PhD. Like, conceptualize it is actually a jump. Like, not because you can't, but because it just doesn't happen for lots of reasons. So, how come that happened for you guys?
Just so before I was Gates, I was a Fulbrighter, and because those are shorter projects, that was kind of and I had studied abroad before that, so I was kind of like big onto the international education aspect of doing a degree overseas, and Fulbright really helped with that. But because of that, and because Auburn has a particularly good fellowship advisor, I was kind of encouraged to look at Cambridge and Oxford, so the Rhodes and the Gates. I had heard of I've certainly heard of Rhodes. I had heard of Gates because it came up in looking at like leadership scholarships and the like, and so then it was just finding a natural supervisor fit. But really, on my end, it was kind of the drive to want to complete education outside the United States, to have a different experience with STEM and biology than what I would get at a PhD program in the US.
So I definitely started in that boat, probably freshman, sophomore year, and then Sarah talked me into looking into things and like, here, take a look at this, talk to this person, through which I realized how much I could gain from coming here, like experience-wise. There's also a professor in our department in material science at Northwestern who was on a Marshall back in the day, who came to Churchill College. So just talking to all these people, I'm like, wow, this is such an amazing experience. I could go off and go to do a PhD, which I will be doing next year. It's just 1 year later. But I could learn so much by going to another country, traveling, not only like scientifically, but just life, culturally. So that's what pulled me to decide I want to do it.
It's interesting. I'm trying to go back to my sophomore, junior year of college and sort of what are the paths that people are thinking about. I don't think fellowships is definitely not in the consciousness of most sophomore, second year, third year undergrads. And I tend, I'm going to make sort of crude generalizations here, but a lot of people like myself, I was actually supposed to go right into medical school, and that was sort of the path. And I had a pretty strong commitment to that. I knew I wanted to do that. But I think what the conversations, it wasn't just the fellowships, right? The concrete funding opportunities. I think it was the conversations that were being asked around the process of applying, even when I'd go to the meetings, and I thought the students were asking bigger questions about what, the purpose of their pursuits would be. And I realized, there are these other questions I need to be thinking about alongside medicine. And I'd already had an interest in, I was majoring in political science. And so I'd say, yes, the fellowships, but it was more like the context of the conversations, I think the questions that were being asked that drew me in. Then I started talking to my professors, and all of a sudden, you could get a public health degree, or you could go for a business degree as the thing that you do alongside medicine. But you know, if you do sociology, you might be able to actually question the categories used in those professional degrees and really expand the conversation. And I think that made it click for me, because then I was like, where could I do an MD PhD that wouldn't take me 20 years in the US in a social science, right? It's just not designed to do MDs and PhDs in a social science. And so there's very few, like University of Chicago, I think Harvard has, there's a very few schools that have those kinds of combined programs. And so then that was part of my argument. And I actually, well, I don't know if I should, I applied for the Gates twice and got it two separate application processes. So I did my MPhil here and then went back to medical school knowing I wanted to do social science, but then wanting to do a bit more med school, and then came back to apply a second time for the PhD funding. And that was part of the argument. I think you were on my panel. So we can talk about the interview. Anyways.
And I would just add on that, something that really, I think, brought me into the, like, even thinking of applying to the Fulbright first and then Gates and Rhodes, was listening to people who had had these experiences. So even, I mean, we're all pretty much open. I think even if we didn't go to North Carolina or Harvard or wherever, we'd be more than happy to, like, if we're in the area, that's something Gates tries to do as well through what we call the ambassador program, actually get Gates scholars there to share their experiences, and that is tremendously helpful, I think, to convince particularly second and third years that this is a worthwhile endeavor.
And for me, it was more wanting to do the master's degrees rather than do the fellowship. So I applied for a number of U.S. masters as well as UK masters after being a couple of years out of undergrad. So as an undergraduate, I knew I wanted to do nonprofit work and work in human rights, but I wasn't quite sure if sort of law school or an MPP or an MPhil was the right path for me. So I took a couple of years and worked, and then kind of applied to these programs that I had narrowed it down to afterwards, and then getting into Cambridge and having my supervisor here and also getting funding was sort of how I got to Gates Cambridge, and having it focused on kind of human rights and improving the world was a natural fit for me and kind of was recommended by a few advisors.
Just to add one more thing, it's already been mentioned briefly, but this wasn't so applicable for me, but for a lot of people that I talk to, is that the professors are really who are on the front lines. So in order to get these students into your offices so you can do the wonderful work that you do, they need to be encouraged quite often. And especially in universities that are smaller and might not have the large fellowship staff, is that professors need to be on board. And we talked a little bit about how that sometimes their interpretation of doing scholarship abroad is problematic, but most of the time it's just that they're not aware of the opportunities, that they hear about it more from the students, like, oh, you want a recommendation letter for that? I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, so they need to be able to advise students to go to you. So
How has your experience as scholars been, do you think, has been different from other Cambridge students?
El Presidente.
It's just been fantastic. So I mentioned, and I'll speak, I guess, as my experience as Gates Cambridge Scholar, since that is what I know. I've been on the Scholars Council for my 3 years here. It's been tremendously rewarding. And I think that, so we are going through an annual survey among our scholars right now. And one of the questions is, what do you, essentially this one, what do you think is the greatest advantage Gates Cambridge offers? And almost universally, the advantage year after year after year is community. And I think talking to other Cambridge students, Cambridge is unique, Oxford, Durham as well, because they have colleges that you have two social groups and two academic groups, the department and your college. Gates Cambridge adds a third on top of that. And we aren't just a funding body in the sense that we do have a very active community which engages the social, academic, and professional development lives of our scholars here and after their time in Cambridge. So I think that would be the most rewarding bit, I would say, as a Gates Cambridge scholar, is just having a community of, at any given time, 200 very, very inspiring, passionate people. We all had to explain why, in an application and an interview, we wanted to improve the lives of others, and we all very much come with that feeling here, and it stays throughout our time here. And so I think just the conversations I've had, the lectures I've heard from my peers have been extremely powerful in shaping kind of my worldview and my time at Cambridge. So yeah, community would be my big thing. but that's probably a biased opinion. So.
Good one.
And everyone, yeah.
It's good reading the Oscar news.
How about you, Edward? You're a Churchill scholar, or
Different. Could you rephrase the question?
criteria are different for Churchill.
Criteria?
What you're saying is you're kind of you're directed in a way, you're primed for that, for a certain direction that Cambridge is going to take you. Churchill is just a little bit different.
I think, it's a little different, and feel free to chime in whenever you feel like, Mike. It's more, I guess, focused on the academic and the science as well. But that being said, like one of the lines they use is like, we're looking for people with jagged edges.
Yeah, not well-rounded, but interesting jagged edges.
That's good. I like that. Yeah. So I don't know if there's like a formula or anything I can give you, but I mean, like any of these scholarship programs, they're just looking for great people, maybe a little more academically focused than, say, like just like doing good in the world or something. But but I wish I had a better answer.
Yeah, so I would say as the Marshall representative, actually the most obvious thing for me is just having the network throughout the UK is really cool. Getting perspectives from scholars, not just at Cambridge, because there's a very noticeable Cambridge bubble, and talking to people that are regularly outside that bubble, while still scholars and still in academia, it is nice to get perspectives of people, not that you would normally get. So, and of course, Marshall specifically is not just a STEM scholarship, which is, I think, a really great strength. I get to interact with people doing all sorts of wonderful things, which is again something to distract me from the lab, where everyone's working on a very focused science thing. So that is really nice.
I can just add on to that. I think this is sort of generally speaking, for students coming to Cambridge, I always tell people you're sort of connected up with a bunch of different communities all at once. It's not community, it's plural, right? Communities, where students are coming in and you've got your academic department, you've got your college community, you've got a scholarship network, and any activities you're a part of, right? So if you decide to be rowing or you decide to do some other group in your college, which is really different than any graduate experience you'll have in the US, right? Which is pretty much you talk to people in your discipline. And that sort of has led to so many, I don't think I put my PhD together the way that I have here anywhere in the U.S. because I've had to bring in conversations from people that are, economics over here, to people who study science and technology studies and the sociology of that, to even theories of like literary theory and finance, and sort of can we express value through in a financialized world, and those kinds of conversations just sort of happen because you're talking to people in really different spaces, and then actually it can lead to collaboration. So if I've run into people where I was over there in the computer lab but in February, and I was really struggling with the fact that we weren't treating more people on this drug. And the mathematical models were all saying, well, we should treat only 5%. That would be the most affordable way to go. That's actually sort of what the public health literature was saying. And I just saw somebody working on a mathematical model, and he was a friend, and I sort of was like, I'm dealing with this sort of modeling problem. And within a week, we were working on a modeling problem together. I'd never done mathematical modeling. He had worked it through, and it's going to be in a post for Health Affairs next week. And he sort of put together the numbers, and I sort of worked with him to think about, the social and political argument, right? And that just, those kinds of conversations, links, I think, are much more likely in a place that allows for sort of fluid movement. I'd say the challenge there is you have to be sort of really self-driven to find those connections and go after that. So I think a student that maybe wants to be a bit more reserved in their space, like won't thrive and take advantage of this kind of an environment as much.
So kind of coming off of that question, for those of you who are here on one-year programs or one academic year programs, when you're here for 3 years, it's a little easier to kind of integrate into the fabric of the community, right? How have you navigated that as knowing that you're only going to be here for 1 year?
Go. I think it's actually incredibly easy to integrate in your first year, and what the problem is for all the PhDs on their second year who get left behind when all of their master's friends leave. So on the Gates orientation, there's this sort of tradition that people ask you if you're an MPhil or a PhD, and then they kind of walk away if you're an MPhil because they don't want to be brokenhearted when you leave. That's only kind of true. But so I do think it is, especially because of Gates Cambridge, but also the collegiate system. An MPhil program tends to be, at least mine is partially taught, so you have classes and you have interaction with your classmates. So I do have these 3 very strong communities that I'm part of, where we went on orientation for 4 days together in the Lake District for Gates Cambridge. So you kind of meet everyone right away and you integrate very quickly into this community. And then you come back and there's Freshers Week, so there's 2 weeks of social events with your college, so you kind of integrate very quickly. And I live in college housing, so I live with tons of other people that are grad students. And a Corpus plug, there are the only all-grad housing site, so we all live together as grad students in our own site with our own dining hall and our own bar and our own library out near my department, which is why I chose it, knowing nothing about Cambridge. And then my department, I have 60 people that are all MPhil, IR, and politics, so it's very easy to kind of interact with them. Some study very similar things to me, and others study completely different things, but it's interesting to talk to them as well. So I don't think it's so hard to integrate, but it is kind of, you're here very quickly, and then it's almost like you're gone, and you don't know where the year's gone.
Yeah, I've had a very similar experience. I haven't really, I guess, even thought about it all that much. It was like very easy to integrate, like our MCR during Freshers Week. There's always stuff going on in the college. Everyone in our scholarship is really close since there are only 14 of us, so we hang out a lot. But yeah, I guess a lot of my closest friends are one-year MPhils as well. There is some truth in the PhD MPhil thing. Someone in my lab group made that joke to me. But yeah, I don't think it's really an issue. Yeah, we've had no issues integrating. It's just been great, and the year has flown by. So.
PhDs do make friends with MPhils. I went to New York for a wedding for some of my MPhil friends in my second year, so it does happen. You get left behind. It's perfect way to say it.
I'm just going to chip in and say quickly, you should continue sort of with your questions to these guys, but if you want to ask a question about any programs, you should also feel free to use us on here, but don't feel like that. So we're here to answer any programmatic
Could
questions.
you tell us what you're doing socially? Sports, societies, what are you doing that's not your academics?
Can I just say, Daphne Marchenko, our first speaker this afternoon, she had to leave because she had another appointment. She sends a report, that's why she's not here on the panel. She is an absolutely outstanding oarswoman, and she rowed for Cambridge in the boat race. Yeah, and that boat that very, very nearly sank. She's absolutely fantastic.
That's amazing.
Club.
One of those courageous.
Yeah. Do you want to just go
I
down
have
the line?
kind of similar to Mary's question. When you came here from the US, what was the biggest cultural difference you found that was awesome or maybe awful? And how did you navigate?
So this actually relates to what I do outside the lab. Cycling is just wonderful here. I think I meant this earlier. And it's kind of one of the things I've taken up outside the lab, not just cycling around Cambridge because it's so easy to get around, but cycling to neighboring towns. I got down to London once actually for the boat race, up to Ely, which is just a little bit north. And it's one of those things that almost everyone in Cambridge cycles. It's just the easiest way to get around. It's faster than a car because the roads are so tiny. And that can be your thing. You can just cycle on your daily commute, or on a weekend you can use the National Cycle Network and go wherever you want to go. And that's just, sometimes when an experiment's not going right and you just want to go, you just hop on the bike and just go. So that's been really nice for me.
Continue with the activities. Yeah. So I play for my college's soccer team, my college tennis team, and I'm the student coordinator for the Center of Governance and Human Rights, which is out of the Paulus department. So we do tons of events, probably once or twice a week, on academics and practitioners in the human rights realm. And I think the biggest difference with U.S. grad school, at least, is that you don't really have that student life as much in the U.S. Most of my friends that are in U.S. programs, you don't play sports with your college or your university team. really don't have this kind of involvement with your social life and your university life. Grad school is much more of a job. You go 9 to 5 and you interact with your department and you do your research, but outside of that, socially, it's minimal contact. So I think here, people, or almost everyone I know, does some sort of sport or musical or other activity with the college. We have a wine society, we have a chocolate society, kind of very much like undergrad almost, but all the grad students really participate, which is a nice change from US grad school, I think.
I'm Gates president, so Gates Cambridge is my life. But no, a lot of, honestly, yes, a lot of my social life is Gates Cambridge. But also I'm involved with science and policy because that's kind of where I want to go with my career. And as well, one of the advantages of going to Cambridge, at least in the UK, is we have a very, very good and very encouraging startup culture. So I'm involved with the Judge Business School on a startup. We're part of an Accelerate program, and they've been very helpful there. So that kind of ties in like something you can do outside that is also an advantage. Just as a disadvantage, heads up to your students coming here, hot and cold water taps are separate, and that is a huge culture shock.
When they're fine, it's hot work.
And I was gonna say, culture shock wise, the appliances are just smaller here. So your fridge, it's like everything's a little bit smaller. So you have to prepare your food appropriately so it doesn't get spoiled. But in terms of the different kinds of things, so I think everyone sort of has a different approach. I'd already, coming into doing the PhD, had worked and sort of had my own apartment back in the U.S. and had done other activities when I was an undergrad. So I sort of approached the PhD more as I was going to have the dissertation project was going to run throughout it, but then I was going to use Cambridge as sort of my experimental lab to just try things that I wouldn't otherwise. So I didn't want to get involved in that one team for 3 years type of strategy. So it was just, that's the way I approached it. And so I've been involved in 2 startups. I've played 1 season of intramural basketball. I've taken classes in acting. I really want to try singing. I've been reading a lot of, I think I've just gotten more into going to theater here, and there's a really active theater culture. So, and Shakespeare, it's 400th anniversary, which is recently in terms of his death. So there was a lot of stuff happening in London. So just really getting, definitely in medical school, there are not these kinds of opportunities. So I'm just really taking advantage of all of that and really trying to just be a sponge for those kinds of. Just a week is pretty much like tonight. I'm going to go down to London for a talk for an author and that kind of stuff, where I just sort of try and take advantage of all the different things happening around Cambridge and in London. It's already only a 45-minute train ride, 51-minute train ride. 49. Yeah, whatever, something like that. It's really quick, right? You just get there and you hop on and you're right pretty much near anywhere you need to be. And so I like to do that at least a few times during the month if I can get there.
Yeah, I definitely have gone down to London quite a few times, even like on a weeknight, just like around like 4 or 5 o'clock or something after lab, because there's just so much to do around London, Cambridge. Some other things I do around here, I played in a couple orchestras, so it's really good for classical music here. There's so many more orchestras than I've seen anywhere else I've been. You can go to a classical music concert any night of the week. So I've spent a lot of time doing that, and I also play soccer and tennis for my college as well. The college system is great. It's unlike anything in like intramurals, even in like undergrad or grad school in the U.S. So, as well as trying things. Oh yeah, you should definitely try all sorts of little things. So one thing I got talked into at the beginning of the year was bartending. So Churchill has like our own student-run bar, so I learned how to bartend, and I bartend like once a week. So lots of little things you can just pick up for fun around here. Yeah.
I'm going to chip in really quickly. This Paul's reminded me, I just mentioned, we do have this amazing ambassador program, sometimes we collaborate with other scholars as well, and our alumni and our scholars are travelling are often not every place in the US or the world, but often available potentially we can ask them if they want to come to a presentation. So you may be in contact with some of the alumni who travel anywhere, but if you are keen to do a presentation on campus, what we can do is perhaps email Louisa and then we can feed that out to our scholars and alumni. We can't guarantee it, but if anyone is around and they can do that, we can connect you up. So
maybe a lecture that isn't actually overtly like come and learn about friendships, but is actually come and hear about genocide in Rwanda, which is one of our scholars does a lot around that work, you know, might actually attract people that may not have come in, and then you've got them in a room, and then you can go, hey, did you know about these friendships? So that's one of the things, but that's been modeled on the Gates Ambassador program. We like to, Jim and I actually do talk to each other occasionally, share best practice. I never talk to roads, ever. It's a lie.
I have a question to Churchill first.
Yes.
So I know you get a lot of outstanding students, but you spoke about the jagged edge. What are some of the outstanding jagged edges?
What's a jagged edge? Well, it's basically a way of saying, if you look at our criteria, we have 3 criteria. Academic achievement, so how well they do in science classes. But we're not looking for overall GPA. We're just looking for in relevant disciplines. We actually, I mean, I couldn't have made this up, but we actually have someone who got a B in Shakespeare. But that's not of any interest to our selection committee what grade they got in Shakespeare. So they do very well in their classes. And then the next one is research achievement. So independent, that they've done high-level independent research. And then the last criteria is our wishy-washy one, and it's called outstanding personal qualities. And it's one of my goals to understand what that means. But it basically means we would like you to do something else in addition to the fact that you do well in school and do research. But we're not judgmental what that could be. So, for example, this year we have a Churchill scholar who started a goat club, of a goat herd at her university. We have somebody who was.
How did your university feel about that?
You can ask.
Is it how the cows started here?
We have someone who's captain of the swim team. A lot of people do volunteer work, that kind of thing. It could be anything.
Don't you hope you can never define that? That you'll never be able to truly define it, but it'll always be something else coming out of the primordial soup of jagged edges.
Possibly. But yeah, it's indefinable.
Related Churchill question. We are not a Churchill institution, but you said there might be some possibilities. Can you talk about what kind of exceptions would you make for students who are not from a Churchill college?
No, what I meant was, we've actually grown a lot in the last 10 years. We went from 70 to 100 participating institutions, so we have added a lot. We've also subtracted a little bit. And our main criteria is that we're looking for institutions that can regularly supply us with competitive candidates. And so in order to become a participating institution, I can talk separately about this, so you can email me, info@churchillscholarship.org. The email comes to me because there is no one else. And there's a way to apply and to demonstrate that you have the types of students that we're looking for and could regularly supply them.
So I think we have time for one more question, because your leaders give me this sign. So I'm not going to mess with that. So one more question?
I have a silly question.
Great,
Do you
perfect.
all wear Cambridge blue every time you present together?
It's not.
This is awesome.
Cambridge blue is more green.
It's actually green. Okay.
This is just sort of terrifying.
I mean, you match them. Yeah, it's like a total street trope.
You'll see.
That cardigan there is Cambridge blue.
That is
Sorry,
Yeah, that's
sorry,
Cambridge
that's
blue.
Cambridge blue.
Sorry, I was gonna say,
Well done. You win the mini miles.
if you see signs that say like "Which blue are you?" That's Cambridge Oxford. So Oxford's navy.
All right, so I think we're going to wrap this up. So a couple of things. One is we have stuff here. Please take it, please. And